is the Wicker Man.
Caesar and his contemporaries describe a gigantic human figure made of wickerwork in the form of an enormous man in which humans and animals were placed, and then the whole thing was set fire to in honor of the gods.
The terrified victim fights his captors as he's locked into the cage-like center of the Wicker Man. His screams for mercy are answered with flame. Ancient writers said the Druids burned victims for Tyrannus because they believed the stench of burning flesh helped bring the fertile summer rains that made the crops grow. The screaming agony of the victim in the Wicker Man was part of the ritual.
And we're talking of theatre, spectacle, the need for the community to see this whole thing happening. And of course, the more you struggle, the better the theatre.
The victim's struggle could have lasted a long time.
If you've ever burned your dinner on the barbecue, you'll have an idea of what he went through. Now, first of all, the Wicker Man occurred in an open field in the open air. Because of this, unfortunately, he would not die from smoke inhalation. Instead, he would be conscious the whole time. Skin burns at about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. An open fire would reach that temperature very quickly. Now, once again, if you're barbecuing, you notice that fat will drip out, and once it hits the coals, it just ignites and explodes. This is what happens in the human skin as well. As the skin burns and cracks, the fat cells, which are basically little bags of cooking oil, leak out and burst into flames, making it even hotter. Now, the human legs are long and thick, and they have a lot of surface area. It takes a long time before total damage takes place, and the victim, unfortunately, is feeling it the whole time. It's just a nasty, ugly, horrible way to die.
Druids performed human sacrifice for centuries. The bloodshed stopped only when the last Celtic Druids were slaughtered by Roman armies in the 1st century. They died taking their secrets with them. Conquering armies wiped out human sacrifice in Roman Europe, and centuries later, Spanish conquerors did the same in Aztec Mexico. But there is one place where human sacrifice continued untouched into the 19th century. Ritual torture and ceremonial killing once took place in the heartland of America. This is all that remains of one of the largest pyramids in the world. Its base is larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt. It is taller than the Aztecs' greatest temple. On this giant pyramid, at the center of a city of 10,000 people, a king and priest prepared to offer a life to the gods. And the site of this grisly ritual sits on the banks of the Mississippi, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. It is called Cahokia. It is one of the most mysterious sites in America. Its inhabitants left no written records. There's no clear connection to any tribes before or after it. Yet 900 years ago, it was the greatest city in North America.
Cahokia was the only city north of Mexico in pre-Columbian times. And this was a city, a true city, in that it had a public area in the middle, which was a large plaza, 50-acre plaza.
This massive city was home to over 10,000 people at its height, from 1050 to 1250 AD. But archaeologists overlooked Cahokia for decades, until the discovery of human remains, sacrifice racks, ritual weapons, and the skeletons of young women show that the key to Cahokia's power was human sacrifice. 1100 AD. On the peak of Cahokia's pyramid, a victim stands spread-eagled on a rack.
They're simple racks to which a person could have their wrists and their ankles tied in sort of an X pattern.
The victim is a young woman of the city. The woman has an honored role, playing the part of the goddess of the corn. But it hardly feels like an honor. The arrows are perfectly aimed to miss her vital organs. This ritual is meant to torture. Cahokians believe the ritual symbolizes the fertilizing of the earth as it is torn, broken, plowed, and planted to produce food for the people. The victim welcomes the final arrow to her heart, but the ritual isn't over. A priest now cuts open her chest, watering the ground with her blood as a gift to the gods. Like the sacred earth that is torn open for planting, her death assures that the crops of Cahokia will flourish for another year.
And so part of the ritual play then would be you sacrifice them as Earth Mother or Corn Mother sacrifices herself to give us corn, to give us life every year.
These sacrifices may seem brutal, but in a world at the mercy of nature, Cahokia's priests tried to sacrifice the one for the good of the many. Cahokia's sacrifices didn't always work, because suddenly around 1200 AD, their crops began to die out. As the corn crop failed, the civilization began to collapse, the result of a worldwide weather pattern.
The climate starts to change. The medieval warm period comes to an end. During the same period, unfortunately for the Cahokians, weather turns a little cooler, moisture patterns shift, and all of a sudden you can't produce the surplus corn that they used to produce as a matter of course. So that's the final nail in the coffin.
To a scientific world, climate change explains the collapse of crops. To an ancient culture, there's only one explanation. The fertility gods are angry. No matter how many women are sacrificed, the corn refuses to grow. The city of Cahokia collapses. By 1300 AD, it is completely abandoned. The people of Cahokia mysteriously vanish. But sacrifice in North America didn't stop. Cahokia's sacrifices were found intact as late as the 1800s, as another tribe splashed the blood of victims to satisfy the corn goddess. For centuries, the blood-soaked fertility myths of human sacrifice dominated the cultures of America. The Cahokia culture, the Mayans, and the Aztecs offered thousands of lives to their bloodthirsty fertility gods. In Mexico, sacrifice ended with the arrival of the conquistadors in 1519. Yet the culture of sacrifice may have been preserved in secret as late as the 19th century. The year is 1838. President Andrew Jackson has just left office. The first railroads are making their way west. And Texans have recently lost the Battle of the Alamo. And not far away, on the American frontier, a gruesome ritual is handed down nearly intact from prehistory. It is a sacrifice by the Pawnee tribe of the American Plains, nearly identical to Cahokia sacrifices 800 years earlier.
They would capture one young female from an enemy, take care of her, treat her very well because she represented the deity. She was going to personify the Earth Mother. At the appropriate time, they would tie her onto a rack, like in Mesoamerica, and after many songs and chants, shoot arrows into her.
The Pawnee tribe believed the sacrifice paid tribute to the goddess of the corn, creating a more fertile and plentiful crop. Its similarity to the ceremonies at Cahokia 800 years earlier makes some believe that the Pawnee tribe may actually be direct descendants of the residents of Cahokia. The mystery of the vanishing citizens of Cahokia may be solved by this ritual. The residents of the ancient city may have become the nomadic Pawnee tribe, which preserved a blood-soaked ritual that stretched back centuries. But this story goes back even further. It turns out the city of Cahokia didn't invent these rituals. They may have copied them when they made contact with civilizations in central Mexico or Mesoamerica, like the Aztecs and Mayans. Mesoamerican art shows similar arrow sacrifices, identical to Cahokia. Handed down to the Pawnee, an unbroken line of bloody human sacrifice.
The Pawnee rituals of sacrifice are one of these linchpins in the whole story of North America. Nobody else in North America were doing what the Pawnee were doing, which was basically conducting a Mesoamerican human sacrifice ritual.
The final Pawnee victim was sacrificed in 1838, soon after the tribe was forced onto a reservation and its ancient rituals were outlawed. Fertility sacrifices may have disappeared from the world, but human sacrifice may not be as primitive as we would like to think. In order to save the tribe, to fertilize the earth, or to regenerate the spirit through sex, humanity has never shied away from spilling blood.
Perhaps the one biggest thing to take away from the study of human sacrifice is that there's no limits to what people will do. When the situation is right, people are capable of doing almost anything.
To the ancient world, sex and death were intimately related, flip sides of a powerful force that keeps the world spinning.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the two primal urges of humanity are sex and death.
The ancients knew that from death springs life. From blood comes birth, and that anything worth having demands nothing less than sacrifice.
Up next, witness extreme expressions of faith through exposure to pain and human sacrifice to gain the goodwill of the gods. The dark side of devotion, blood for the gods, continues next.